I call routine tests that everybody should be doing. In fact, I think for a couple of minutes I'll tell you, I'm 62, and I thought I integrate the best of medicine and wellness. In fact, what Nutrimedical stands for is bringing nutrition and medicine together. And that means that if you're 62 and my age, for example, I've done a colonoscopy. I'm doing more tests, chest x-rays, EKGs, not only regular blood work, but fancy blood work. Like I have a cardio-ion test kit that I'll probably be doing tomorrow morning. This is important, and you need to schedule time. If you're a woman, you need to get your pap smears done. If you get an acetic acid test and the pap smear is abnormal, you need to cauterize it. If you've got polyps, those need to be removed from your colon. These are important to get these tests done in order to find out what's going on. You can start with the screening with things like the QRMA. It will tell you what's going on in terms of the systems or bioplasm NLS. Once you have that knowledge level that there's a specific problem, then this regular screening tests are important. So I'm doing fine. I just need to take off time in order to do these tests. And sometimes, of course, being doctors, they need to schedule you when you're doing the show. So I'm perfectly fine here. I appreciate your prayers, like for anybody, because we're at the tip of the spear, but I am fine. So thank you out there for praying for me. But your prayers are for the ministry, for what we do regularly. But I am absolutely okay. You can hear my voice. You can know how strong I am. And everything is just great. So I take care of business. And I tell people out there, don't just, quote, take nutritional vitamins only. There are occasionally situations where you may even need to take drugs, but with great provisement. For example, we know things like calcium channel blockers can be very bad. HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors, all the nasty side effects, we talk about that. There are drugs that are safe, like ACE inhibitors and diuretics, that may be helpful at times beyond the natural diuretics that we carry. There may be times when you need to take bioidentical hormone replacement to make sure that your hormones are normalized. So it's important for people to understand that we integrate the best of surgery. I recommend, for example, if you had an umbilical hernia, get laparoscopic repair. If you have a problem with a mechanical foot problem, you need to get that fixed with your podiatrist surgically. If you have a microdiscectomy to take a disc that's pressing against a nerve root, then take care of it. It's like maintenance of your car. But it should give a warning to everybody that don't just think that you can take only nutritional approaches, but also don't take toxic medicine. Don't take medicine that we warn you is toxic, and do integrate wellness with the very best of nutraceuticals and Nutrimeds and the very best of medicine, whether it's surgery or intensive care or whatever. But be very careful, because there's a lot of drugs get approved that should not be approved, and a lot of people are taking them inappropriately, and a lot of doctors are very ignorant of the importance of functional medicine and the advanced testing that will tell you, for example, that will link directly toward disease. For example, breast cancer, the xenoestrogens in your body, you can do a biopsy, which I've done for 30 years, send off to AccuChem laboratories to look for volatile chemicals. And if someone's at risk of breast cancer, we've done the BRCA panel for years, BRCA1 and 2 gene panel, you only are at risk if you don't do the right things. Same with diabetes. You've got to get your hemoglobin A1C into a normal range. We have anti-glycating agents such as carnosine and Vein-A that help to stop that, the glycation effect. We have things to prevent vascular blockage like lumpurkinase and nattokinase, which I think are superior to the drugs that are given by cardiologists, such as Coumadin, which is rat poison, or some of the newer, we call blood thinner medications. So we want to integrate the very best of everything, so you have to understand that, and that's why I'll be going over much more detail. Everybody that I say is over 55 should have a colonoscopy or sigmoidoscopy of the lower bowel, women mammograms, and I regularly recommend the thermal mammograms. Actually, a thermogram will actually pick up changes in the breast years before there's a mammographic change, and the digital mammography is more accurate, and in fact MRI scan with what's called a graphite tag, so they can find it later. If they find an abnormal area, they're going to monitor. So MRI scan of the breast is extremely accurate, and thermography is a screening test. And I recommend women do regular thermographic screening, and don't do the mammograms as often as they say, unless the thermogram is showing abnormal thermographic evidence that things are changing. So we're going to try to pop in Amy from PrepareWise, but Tim, I'm sure you have a lot of news, and we're going to be also having you back in hour number 3. There's so much news, in effect, even when I'm taking this medical break to get all my tests done with my doctor, just screening tests, keeping myself healthy. What's the major news items that you're following today?
Well, glad to hear your you're okay.
Oh, yeah, I'm just getting a lot of tests done. I'm sure, well, you're even a few years older than me, and you know you have
No, not a few. One. I'm 63. Don't make me older than what I am, please.
Okay, well, just, maybe you're wiser. Maybe that's it. You just feel
Yeah, that's it. Right, sure.
That 1 year makes a big difference, eh? All of a sudden, your wisdom level goes up when you get 1 year older. How's that?
Yeah, well, I wish it were a lot higher than what it is. But
well, we need a lot of wisdom. From the most I got, we need more wisdom than neither of us have to deal with the craziness of what's going on nowadays. So let's go through all the stories.
There are a couple simultaneous NATO war games going on, particularly in the Baltic area, land, sea, and air games. And Russia has just announced a very large surprise military maneuvers to counter the NATO war games.
Really?
So you have a situation where both NATO and Russia are engaging in very large military maneuvers at the same time and in relatively close proximity to one another.
What does that sound like to you?
Well, at best, it's dangerous and ill-advised, but not apt to go hot. At worst, this will go hot and begin World War III. I tend to think probably not, but I'll tell you, this is stupid to do this.
I'll tell you what it's like. The analogy I would do, we did stupid kids and things when we were young, right? Things nowadays that if parents saw their children do it, the parents would probably get in trouble with the police if they let the kids play with fire, or set up things like Atlantals or catapults throwing giant stones or snowballs the size of your head. This is the kind of game playing that if somebody makes a mistake, this could flare up into something bad. And at the very least, it's going to actually saber rattle to say, hey, don't make a move. And then if somebody decides that they have to politically or otherwise make a move, the counter move could be very bad, couldn't it?
Yeah, when you have nuclear-armed powers on both sides and the tensions that have been racketing up for a couple months now in and around the Ukraine, you have a potentially very dangerous situation. And you need some adults in the room to say, okay, kiddies, let's put the toys down, let's settle down, it's nap time now. But the adults don't seem to be there, particularly on the NATO side. This is all a contrived crisis. We instituted the coup d'etat that put the Nazis and Zionist global bankers and oligarchs in power. That's a very strange combination, by the way.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? I mean, and how did they sidestep this with Obama and Rasmussen, the head of NATO, and the other characters in NATO? I mean, we're dealing with people like the French. We're just crushed by the Nazis, with the Maginot Line and everything. I just don't understand how these people can stomach doing what they're doing right now. How can they stomach it?
I don't know either, because many of these fascists, and they're literally fascists, they walk down the street and give the Hitler salute. And, my ancestors, my uncles, my dad, and all were in the Second World War. And we fought that insanity. And yet here it is, American, French, British, Canadian, and so forth, tax dollars going to support these jokers. But, look at Syria. I mean, we're supporting the most extremist groups possible that are going in and deliberately killing people, in many cases, simply because they're Christians.
Well,
us Christians, our tax dollars are going to fund groups that are going into places and deliberately killing people because they're Christians. Now,
you had that minister from
here,
Tim, when I was away a year ago on the show, you actually had one of the Orthodox ministers from Syria interviewed.
No, it was an Orthodox priest from Chicago that went to Syria.
Went to Syria. What do you talk about this priest from Chicago? Well, welcome back, and Tim, you had a priest from Chicago on last year while I was away for an hour, and you were covering the show, and he had some interesting comments. He was an Orthodox priest, so he traveled to Syria, which is Orthodox Christian. In fact, it's the seat of Orthodox Christianity, started in Syria.
In Antioch, there are multiple jurisdictions in North America and South America and Australia, Greek Orthodox, Romanian Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Antiochian Orthodox, which is kind of in part of Turkey and Lebanon and so forth. And the particular church that's here happens to be Antiochian jurisdiction, but they're in the process of joining all of them together, and it's going to take 2 or 3 years. But anyway, we have been hearing from relatives of people that were church members around the country that the story that's being told on the mainstream media about what's happening in Syria was blatantly false, and that the people overwhelmingly supported the Syrian government. Well, the priest and bishops wanted to they didn't really know what to do, so they decided, let's send a delegation over. And the Syrians not only allowed it, but they opened all the doors. They said, you can go anywhere you want. There are some places we strongly recommend you don't go because the fighting is intense. You could get killed. But we're not, you're free to go anywhere you want. And the priest said the only guns he saw on the trip, because they didn't go to the front line, was a few guards at the presidential palace. And he said he sees more guns in Chicago. They sat down to dinner with Assad. He sat right across from Assad at the dining table. And Assad said, Christians are very important in the Middle East, because if you have a healthy Christian community, it helps to keep the different Muslim groups from attacking one another, because
it's a moderating influence.
Yeah, it's a moderating influence, and it also shows that you can tolerate diversions of religious views without having to want to go.
The Alawites have proved that. The Alawites have proven that they can tolerate other versions of Islam, including they have good, strong business relations with Christians and with Sunni Muslims. And that's
there are very few left anymore, but they've actually tolerated and protected the Jewish community in that area. And that's their basic principles, is they tolerate people's freedom of religion, and that's a positive thing. Now, what you're seeing today in Syria, literally today, Assad is just opening the prison doors to people that have been taken prisoner in the civil war going on. That's a sign that the war is winding down, that he's won. They've reclaimed most of the country. Of course, people can still sneak in and set off bombs and stuff, but it's the Syrian people have done that. They had some support from Russia and China, but those were just
the Syrian people basically have learned to live together. Is what the situation is.
Well, they're very tough.
My great-grandmother
we had
was Syrian.
A gal about a week ago at my church. She was a beauty queen from Syria. Wow, I mean, she was breathtaking. But they're good people. They don't want this war that's been imposed on them, just as the people in the Ukraine don't want the war that's been imposed on them.
My great-grandmother was Orthodox Christian, and she was Syrian. She was from Damascus. Her father, her husband, my great-grandmother's husband, owned a caravan that went from Damascus all the way to China twice a year. And these are tough people. She'd walk beside the camels. This is 150 years ago, obviously, all the way to China twice a year.
Wow.
Twice a year. Okay, and they were Orthodox Christians. They owned the caravan. By the way, whenever you go through the Middle East, the Christians are the best businessmen in the Middle East besides the Jews. And when they cleared out a lot of the Christians, scared a lot of them out of Egypt, out of Cairo, this is part of the reason, not Cairo, I mean Libya. What happened just drove the business out of Libya. Even in Iraq, the former president there that got destroyed by America, Saddam Hussein, his foreign minister and his banking people were all Christians, because he said he couldn't trust the Muslims.
Well, one thing I have noticed since I joined the Orthodox Church is many of the people that I have met from the Middle East and also Eastern Europe, practically everybody is a doctor, either a physician or a PhD, and it's really quite amazing how well educated so many of these people are.
Oh, very
in the Christian community, there's this strong emphasis on education.
Right. Well, my great uncle was the owner of the publishing company in Beirut that published the book Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, and on my mother's side, all the families were engineers and doctors and so on, going back for generations. So, yeah,
but see, that's not the picture that the mainstream media paints.
No.
The mainstream media now, there are 6 corporations that control 96% of mainstream news media in the United States. They're all globalist owned and essentially Zionist-ran organizations. And they always want to present a picture of people in the Middle East as lunatics out in the streets jumping up and down burning American flags. And granted, there are plenty of lunatics there, and we have our own version of lunatics here. But what you don't get is a balanced view. And that balanced view, many of the people are very well educated, very cultured, peaceful. When you meet them, generally pretty nice people. I mean, I've even known quite a few Arab Muslims, and by and large, most of them have been pretty decent people that I've known.
Exactly. The radicalization, by the way, was done by a combination of the British and a few elements within Saudi Arabia. Radicalization wasn't the case before. Radical Islam has only risen in the last century, literally because the British wanted to start. In fact, I think the Muslim Brotherhood was started not in the Middle East, but in London, England, believe it or not.
Yeah. And also,
Isn't that interesting? London. We call it Londonistan. How's that?
What I always say, Israel has empowered the Iranian mullahs to be their principal opposition, because the Israelis continue to seize airland and to mistreat the Palestinian population, and of course they broke
I really don't see why they want to seize land, because their birth rate is so low that the current Jewish population will disappear in a century.
Well, you have people like Netanyahu that are just nuts.
Yeah, I just don't understand what their modus is. They would be better off to just be good businessmen and do business in the local country with the local countries beside them, because they don't want to take on. Throw out some news items. We're going to be back in hour 3 to talk about this more. A lot of different news items that you have, because you'll have a bunch posted. But Iraq militant seized Mosul, causing thousands to flee. So that's quite a big story. Friendly fire kills.
Supposedly the new Ukrainian president has said that they're going to open a corridor, a humanitarian corridor, so that
this is one in Iraq, by the way.
I'll believe it when it happens.
Yeah, this is Iraq, and then friendly fire kills 5 U.S. service personnel and members in Afghanistan. Friendly fire. Why can they call it friendly fire? Friendly.
Well, they called it an airstrike. It was a B-1, which is a very good bomber. It actually handles like a fighter plane.
Right.
And, the difference between killing your own and killing the enemy is often a 100-foot or 300-foot.
Have you heard the latest comments by the Iranian Ayatollah Khomeini, what he's basically said? Because he said basically we have the right to have nuclear weapons and a nuclear power, and so what? So why the U.S. Iranian?
What they really have, and this is kept from the great masses of people, because when people start thinking, "Holy, we're picking a fight with these guys, and they've got the capacity to wipe half of us or more out," They don't want you thinking that. What the Iranians have, and we've talked about this before on the show, is a extremely sophisticated advanced biowar program.
Yeah, but they also have several other things besides the biowars. They've got, other than ours, one of the most advanced electronic drone warfare program. In fact, they cloned our drone. They have the Shaheed-3 missile that can strike anywhere in Europe or our military bases in the Middle East, very accurately, by the way. They do have nuclear weapons from Pakistan. People should understand that the Waziristan nuclear development program is the third largest weapons development facility, and actually is the highest output right now in the world in terms of throughput, in terms of several hundred.
50 thermonuclear bombs a year. That's a lot. Family can kick out.
And we're not doing that in the States or, as far as I know, in the Soviet Union, Russia. I still call it the Soviet Union because I don't believe the Soviet Union ever went away. It was all, as my friends say in Belarus, we just changed hats. So there's former Soviet republics that really have Soviet-style people that are really the oligarchs, the rich, the powerful, the inner circle. And that, by law in Russia, it was only 10% of the population could ever be a member of the party. So people have to understand that the version of communism that's in Russia is not what Marx wrote or what's in China.
And what Marx wrote was for public consumption anyway. It was all fraud.
Right.
That's why, who supported the communist revolutionaries in Imperial Russia that overthrew the Tsar and so forth? It was the global banking cartel, the Warburg family and Rothschilds and so forth. They were the ones with the gold, the money that literally caused the revolution and brought they brought a lot of people over from the United States. So the communism was always a fraud. Communism is about concentration of power for a very tiny elite.
What I was told is that there was a division from, I don't know the name of it, I remember it, but it's a division, I believe, from Fort Benning, Georgia, and the Canadian 100 Division marched into what was at that time St. Petersburg and Moscow during the end of World War I, and held the cities for 6 months plus until the Bolsheviks, the Sabbatean Satanists, because they didn't even have a pop gun, received their guns manufactured in Pennsylvania for them, paid for by J.P. Morgan, who was a proxy. He's only a proxy, remember, he's a front man for
Rothschild.
So what happened is the bankers funded and backed and gave the weapons, and even through the Canadian and the U.S. government supplied divisions.
They also, a few years later, funded a fellow with a funny-looking mustache that ignited the world, Adolf Hitler.
Adolf Hitler, yeah. I thought it was kind of funny how they kind of say how he came about his mustache, that he couldn't get his mask on in World War I with the gas warfare. So he snipped off the sides of his mustache and his gas mask would fit.
Well, I think it made him look different.
I think they were trying to use a little bit of how can I say, a little literary license there, but
Hitler, was 1/4 Rothschild, and
well, actually, he was trying to revolt against them too. Just remember, there's not just a lockstep of even the blood descendants of these Rothschilds and these global bankers. I did some research, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, that the most accurate lineal blood descendant of that should be, in a sense, the royals in Britain. I believe are living in Australia. That in fact, if you actually check the bloodlines, you'll find that the pure bloodline is actually in Australia. And I think he owns a company that does like air conditioning or something like that. People don't understand that it's not all of these people that are kind of blood descendants are all lockstep with the evil plans that are going on.
No, and there are plenty of billionaires in the world that are not on board this new world order.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I got a request 4 years ago. Was it 4 years ago when we had the outbreak of the swine flu from one of the billionaires here in California, their daughter, that owns a castle up, near San Francisco, and they wanted to know if they could pass out all of my talks and DVDs out to all of their friends. I said, by all means, just copy it and send it out. So, people should understand that a lot of the rich and powerful are even in some ways have more to lose, and they usually are more aware of just how nuts there are some of their kin that are kind of not just wanting to have money which to them, if you use it properly, for example, if you set up proper foundations, it's good. But when you have people like Bill Gates that wants to control the population, or Ted Turner...
Well, he's got 70-some billion. When I was going to do the Third Millennium Global News, and I canceled everything the last minute because my wife was diagnosed with terminal ovarian cancer out of the blue. And I was literally, my 75% ownership was, we were going to sell in 2 or 3 years. It was the dot-com phase. And I was looking at $1 to $2 billion is what I would have realistically got for my share. And when you have that kind of money, and I didn't grow up rich, when you think you're going to have that kind of money, you really have to start thinking, what am I going to do with it? And a great deal of money is only useful as par, because how many mansions can you have? How many jet airplanes can you have? How many Rolls Royces and Ferraris and so forth can you have? You get to the point like the late Saddam Hussein had 100. Well, I say late. Actually, I think he's living in Russia and alive. The guy we hung was a double. But Saddam Hussein had over 100 palaces, and each of them cost many millions of dollars. Well, he was sitting on the second biggest pile of oil in the world, so he could have anything he wanted. Well, you know what? If you had 100 palaces or more to go to, that'd be like going to a fancy hotel. It wouldn't be home.
No,
how many planes can you have? You can only fly on one at a time. And ultimately, these people that in many cases are worth trillions of dollars, and they want more, and they want more, and they want more. That's a demonic.
What happens to the money that becomes a plaything, where you then you don't just lust after money, because money becomes the number becomes so astronomical. I was reading the other day that Bill Gates has enough money to buy every home in Boston.
Yeah, I read that. But, he wants to, he's pushing eugenics and everything else. But if you look at the history of how he got to be Bill Gates, his parents were deeply involved in the eugenics movement, and that's how IBM ended up releasing a lot of their stuff to him, because he could fund eugenics.
IBM Corporation made the Hollerith cards for the Nazi death camps. And by the way, they weren't incinerating bodies there. People need to know they were work camps. Arbeit macht frei. Work makes freedom. And what happened is most of them died of starvation, typhus, and other diseases, because not even the soldiers could get even a potato to eat at the end of the war.
Is your whole health constantly challenged? Would you like to age less? Then consider taking ageless chocolate and...
The average person doesn't want more, is what we talked about on the break. And as I mentioned, my great-grandmother, who was, her husband owned the caravan going back from Damascus to China. And these were wealthy people, but they worked hard. And literally, the custom was, if you wanted something from their home, they would defeat any stranger. This is part of the Middle Eastern thing. They would do anything to make sure that you didn't starve to death, die of the elements. And if you liked something that was in their home, they would just give it to you. The shirt off their back, but God help you if you did something nasty or tried to cause harm. And you can't back the people of the Middle East against the wall and not expect to have something terrible. And not also to understanding just how intelligent they are. I spoke to one of my researchers, and I won't mention his name, who researched the Scud missiles launchers that were being built in Iraq during the time before Gulf War I. And it turned out the Iraqis had contracted to a Norwegian welder to train their people how to weld these together. When he came back 10 months later, they were welding them so well that they said he was doing a better job than he could in half the time. These are intelligent people, they're determined people, and if you look like there's nothing left for them to do and you're going to kill them all, you're asking for annihilation. I mean, when you're dealing with really extreme elements like
we get
Islam,
to the point where we say it's crazy,
right?
It
And then
makes
you get
no sense.
Right, then you get Islam, and you get extreme elements in Islam. You combine that with this culture. You take this tiny fraction of real extreme Muslims, and they're intelligent. Let's say they got a master's or PhD in biological weapons development, and they've got a vial in the back of their fridge in Chicago and Atlanta and Los Angeles. They're going to get their prayer mat out. They're going to lean forward and put their butt in the air, and they're going to say a prayer to Allah, pointing eastward. And then they're going to go in the back of the fridge and lyophilized flask. They're going to add some distilled water, get a spray bottle, and sit in a bus and just spray it out the window. And people say, oh, no, they won't do that. I say, are you crazy? Do you understand that you cannot? In other words, there should be a big sign, World War III. You know, that big knot sign that has a big red circle with a line through it?
Right.
And all of the elements we're doing, we see Obama doing it, we see Mr. Rasmussen from NATO. The only one that's really rational and sane here seems to be Mr. Putin, who's even restrained from coming in and saving the Donbass kids and the people of eastern Ukraine, even though they've been shelling.
He actually surprised me because I thought that he would be. They box him in and he'd have to respond. So far, he hasn't, because he knows what's at stake. He knows that this is all to get him suckered in, and he's handled things brilliantly. Here's the point: you always ask who benefits. Now, the average person doesn't want war. The average person wants to live in peace and prosperity. There are always some nuts out there. A certain element of society, maybe 2% or 5% is always nuts. There's always people who are some sort of extremists that want to kill and hate and so forth. You know, you got the Ku Klux Klan and et cetera, et cetera. But those are the nut jobs. The average person is quite prepared, if they're a Christian, to sit down with a Muslim or a Jew and be friendly and be decent with them, because they're decent. Same way with Buddhists and Hindus and so forth.
One of the things I think people should understand is that other than the direct knowledge of the Most High God, all of us are ignorant. And that means including inside the, quote, Christian faith, we all carry a lot of baggage. A lot of it is things that we've taken from ancient pagan cults that have been taken into Christianity. And then these other organizations, they've been molded. For example, the Wahhabist schools were funded by the princes of Saudi Arabia because it serves their purpose to have an extreme element. And right now, of course, they're fighting with them, but they actually funded them. For example,
again, it goes back to who benefits, you see.
Right, well, they benefit from having an extreme element, just like we benefit by having a dog on a choke chain, that dog being extreme Islam. Even though they made public statements that when they get man pads and can have ground-to-air missiles, they're going to shoot European and American jets down 5 to 7 miles from an airport, because they're going to have that equipment that they're going to receive to take out the Syrian regime. And as we give them bigger and bigger weapons, we put ourselves in grave danger, because Islam basically sees us as the great Satan, and we are. I mean, because we're a proxy for the bankers. In Islam, again, for example, people don't understand this, that usury or interest is illegal. It's interesting. It was illegal during the Middle Ages in the Catholic Church.
I was just about to say that. It was illegal all over.
In the Catholic Church, the Catholic Church would hire bankers, where the kippah for the Jews was meaning they're under the authority of the Vatican, and they had the lineal right to actually charge interest. So that's how the job of the Burgermeisters and how the financial empire of the so-called Sabbatean Jews arose, simply because the Vatican gave them that right. Because remember, the crowner of all the kings, the owner of all the financial systems, was and still is the Vatican. People don't believe that. They think it's just Banco Ambrosio.
Also, it's how capitalism started, because
capitalism started with
putting money to work.
Well, the Knights Templar were the first to set up
derived from that whole thinking process.
Well, the Knights Templar were the first to actually. Yeah, the Knights Templar invented banking. The Knights Templar invented what's called the note. So if you were a pilgrim to the Middle East, you'd have a note signed by the Knight Templar, and the Knight Templar would basically say,
and their bank there would handle it, so you didn't have to carry gold as you went across the Mediterranean, or you went by land for 1,000 miles. You didn't have to carry gold. You carried a piece of paper that was. And you just turned it in when you got to Jerusalem, and the Knights Templar said, okay, this is worth whatever the currency was, gold coins, and here it is. And that was a lot of the foundation of the modern world came from stuff like that. And if you understand the history of it, stuff begins to make sense.
Well, also that's why there was a fight
of money for money. You know, the Wall Street, there's far too much. Wall Street is like a giant casino, and it's rigged for the insiders. It doesn't really reflect the true value of the corporation that you're buying a percentage of when you buy the stock.
Gerald Celente has pointed out that the asset explosion bubble that they're created now by negative interest. So when the bank-to-bank loaning money has to deposit and pay for deposits in the European Central Bank, it just means that the poor people get poorer and the ultra-rich can speculate and buy more assets.
Well, yeah, the idea behind it, this is the theory that's expressed to the population in Europe now, is that the banks have been sitting on money, not loaning it out, and they're penalized now if they sit on it. So it's to increase the velocity of money to get the money loaned out. I suspect it won't particularly work. I suspect, by the way, when you see Putin is getting his licks in, and so are the Chinese, they're doing deals now in either rubles or the Chinese currency or gold, and this is what we've tried to avoid. And now you have, the BRICS countries, and they've got about 80 countries now that are. But
Chinese policy isn't going to work. Okay, in fact, it's going to blow up in their face because here's the real story. 3 years ago, the Chinese got really ticked off that transnational corporations, primarily American and British, were buying up and even setting up corporations owning over 50%. And the Chinese were terrified because we were printing money like crazy and literally setting up corporations all over China and then using slave labor, just like Foxconn facility, to make all these electronic devices. And the Chinese realized, so they kicked everybody out, and they said, well, now you can only own 50%, but then they tried to be really aggressive and say, we want to own the intellectual property. And a good example was Bombardier Corporation of Quebec, Canada, which makes the best high-speed light rail. What the Chinese did is took that technology, tweaked it a bit, made it about another 50 to 75 kilometers an hour faster, and said, it's our technology now. And they're trying to do that with Boeing Aerospace and other companies, so they're very predatory.
They've done that with Russia on arms until they finally Russia laid the law down.
And here's what's happening. The Chinese, you can't do that act unethically toward your business partners, because what the transnationals are doing now is say, okay, Chinese, we'll move it to Kerala, India. We'll move it to Malaysia. There's lots of other people, especially in English-speaking countries like India, where it's easier to get English-speaking workers, far easier, because the education system is British, than it is in China. And so China now
India is benefiting from that, by the way.
Right, and what's happening is China is going to really hit the skids here, and that's why their inflation is so high, because their aggressive international business practices tied with their military kind of saber rattling is going to blow up in their face, because you got to do business with the rest of the world or you don't have business. And if you're like that, you're going to get in trouble. And the Indians are benefiting the Malaysians and the other countries that are willing to bring in these corporations. And that's why Chinese attitude of getting all the gold and trying to be aggressive like that is bad. Bad for business.
Yeah.
Tim, we'll have you back in hour number 3. Hour 2 coming up with health and wellness. Back in just a moment. Stay tuned.
Henry Ford once said, a man who stops advertising to save money is like a man who stops a clock to save time. Alex Castle here, the National Account Executive at GCN. I have the ability to customize a national radio campaign based on your budget while targeting your demographic. Contact me to find out how national radio can help your business be more profitable at 877-996-4327, extension 177. That's 877-996-4327, extension 177, and help me help you bring your business to the next level.
We the people grow cotton, weave fabric, engrave ink, embed strips and fibers to protect from counterfeit and carting to a private bank, having it led back at interest, forcing taxes to service debt. This capitalism, or was Jefferson correct when stating a central bank issuing the public currency is a greater menace to the liberties of the people than a standing army? Ted Anderson, I'm placing a free silver dollar in a book that explains our monetary system. Call for your copy, 800-686-2237. It's time to understand the system. Call 800-686-2237. That's 800-686-2237.
We live in a complicated society. Stressful issues are always popping up. Have you ever been treated unfairly by someone? Have you ever been overcharged for a repair? Have you ever